All right, welcome back. This is Foster the Podcast, episode 3. I am your host, Foster the Prankster. Thank y'all for joining us. The holiday season is upon us, and I hope everybody out there is staying safe, planning to spend a lot of time with family and friends. The traffic's getting crazy again. The stores are getting packed, so everybody just be safe and enjoy. We got a lot to talk about this week. There's been a lot of things going on. Let's get right into it. I know a lot of people have been talking about this Obama-produced Netflix film, Leave the World Behind. This movie seems to have captured the minds and imaginations of a lot of people on social media the past week or so, and I'm sure that that's part of the intention. So there's been a lot of speculation as to whether this film is some sort of predictive programming. If you're not familiar with the concept of predictive programming, it's basically this idea that the higher ups and people behind the scenes in the deep state and entertainment industry sort of put these scenarios and these events, certain things in films and media to kind of lessen the blow when these things happen in real life. It's sort of like getting you to tacitly accept certain catastrophic or traumatic events so that, when it happens, you almost don't believe it's real or can sort of like dissociate from it. And then, you can be controlled essentially. So the film, if you haven't seen it, the film sort of depicts this event of a massive it's hard to tell if it's like a grid outage because some people have electricity, it seems like, but then and we're not sure if it's just the internet being out, but so it depicts this massive like internet outage and stuff like this. And yeah, man, it's it's interesting as far as like a mini short review. I didn't think that the film is cool. It's not necessarily compelling, but it was interesting, and I think it's interesting that so many people seem like they're just now thinking about this. I saw a lot of people like, oh, this Netflix is dropping Easter eggs and all this. I'm like, okay, it's not really like this is something that's been talked about for probably like 30 years within like the whatever you want to call conspiracy community or what have you. So I think it's crazy that people are just now like considering this because of this film, considering an event like this taking place is wild to me, and it sort of outlines how far we've gotten from reality, how people sort of take all of this like internet and electricity and modern conveniences for granted and assume that this stuff is just like the air we breathe, right? It's like the water we swim in. It's always going to be here. But yeah, so this idea has been, like I said, floated for decades now. I mean, this is something that's been talked about, a grid, an electrical grid or internet outage. And this goes back to, I know that we're sort of deep, into the 21st century now. There's a lot of kids who were born at the turn of the century, at the millennium and post, who don't really remember, but there was this situation called Y2K where in 1999 and the late 90s, but in 99, the media really started ramping up this idea that the way that a lot of infrastructure had technological infrastructure had been implemented and programmed that the computers couldn't recognize the zeros in the year 2000, and that this was going to cause like a major banking collapse, and that there was going to be panic, and that nothing, your ATM wouldn't work, your all sort of like computer systems were going to go down. And so they called this Y2K, and it was a really major media frenzy campaign, sort of like, not to the same extent, but sort of like what COVID was for the media, just this very broad fear campaign about what was going to go on. And a lot of people bought into it, man. There was a lot of like preppers and a lot of people buying all types of cases of water and things like this, and thinking that this was going to be the end. And the clock struck midnight and nothing happened, right? There's been a bunch of media about this, but one of the bigger ones in recent years there was a South Park episode about where like all of the internet infrastructure goes down and people are going out California way. They call it going out to Cali because the West Coast they heard had internet, and this Randy and Stan and the family, they pack up and they go out west to look for internet, and the military has these refugee camps set up where they're rationing internet and you could get like 1 minute a day and stuff like this. So again, so like this has been a common sort of thing, and it has always again been written off as conspiracy theory, like so many of the things that have happened in the past few years that have happened to come true. But let's take a look at a couple of things going back. And this is from a .gov website. This is a government document, and this is from a congressional subcommittee hearing on, let's see, what's it called? Blackout. Are we prepared to manage the aftermath of a cyber attack or other failure of the electrical grid? And you could find this document. Like I said, this is a website called govinfo.gov. It's a whole transcript of this subcommittee meeting where they're discussing this idea. And this is from Thursday, April 14th, 2016. So we're now in 2023, and our government's been meeting about stuff like this for, who knows how long, but at least since 2016, as far as this document goes, and nothing has really like been done about this. It hasn't really been like a big, a major story, or, it's not something that people seem to be overly concerned with. But it says a lot in here. This is a very long document, but they cite a guy named Ted Koppel who wrote a book saying that we should plan for, that America, I guess, should be planned for 6 to 18 months of uninterrupted blackouts. And that this whole document is about like critical infrastructure, and they cite a 2015 cyber attack on Ukraine's electrical grid. And so, so this idea has been floated in government for a while, and it doesn't really seem like we have a on the ground solution for what would go on during an event like this. And so, there's a bunch of different things, like a bunch of different documents like this. I remember hearing about this was either an energy secretary or somebody that worked for the energy department under George W. Bush, Bush Jr. And I remember this person citing a stat saying something like, an estimated stat that something like 40% of Americans would die in any sort of prolonged electrical grid outage. So anything more than like 2 weeks, that a lot of people would be dead within the first 2 weeks, 40%. There's another document we have here. This study that was done says, in a testimony before a congressional committee, it's been asserted that a prolonged collapse of the nation's electrical grid through starvation, disease, and societal collapse could result in the death of up to 90% of the American population. And this document goes on to talk about EMP attacks, or just kinetic, like physical attacks on infrastructure, bombing of electrical, substations and things like this. So part of the issue is, and this document also says, I think they up the timeline to like 12 to 24 months due to the production time for high voltage transformers. So they use basically high voltage transformers, send these currents to substations that like provide your more local power. And they've identified, I guess, 30 of these HV, the high voltage transformers, as being critical to the infrastructure, and that the simultaneous loss of 9 of these transformers could cripple the entire grid and cause basically a domino effect of coast to coast blackouts. So again, we're talking about, between these two claims, 40% and between 40 and 90% of Americans. And it sounds crazy, right? It sounds like, pretty dramatic. But when you think about, the amount of people in hospitals, the amount of people who are reliant on some sort of, electric, machines to be functioning to either help them stay alive or, different medical procedures that need to be done, all this different stuff. How much of American diet is based on refrigeration? What are you supposed to do when all of the freezers and all of the refrigeration goes down? It's definitely not unreasonable to make these like really dramatic claims about the amount of lives that could be at stake. So, again, with something like COVID, where it was like a very up in the air, you didn't really know what the projections of, what the fatality rate was going to be. I mean, the ramifications of stuff like this, of a massive infrastructure collapse, it's like you can't even really quantify it. There's really no way to know. Again, being in a first world country that's so dependent on this stuff, it's sort of ridiculous when you zoom out and you think about just not having electricity, how that could put so many lives at stake and how dependent we are on all of this stuff. Another great reporter who's been doing just amazing work for years, Whitney Webb, she's like the GOAT in my opinion. She's like probably the one of the last true investigative journalists that we have. And she's not even based in the US, but she's originally from here. And so, does a lot of reporting on, the intelligence community and all this different stuff. So she appeared on a show called Redacted recently to talk about this exercise that has been exercise and simulation that's been run by cybersecurity firms that are affiliated with Israeli intelligence and the World Economic Forum. And so she appeared on Redacted. I'm going to let Whitney cook for a little bit. We just go and listen to her because this is really great information.
Now, you believe that this cyber attack is a false flag operation. Is it your concern that Israel would want the United States to attack Iran first, that they wouldn't be able to do this? What does your reporting show on that side of it?
So it's not really just my reporting, it's reporting from mainstream media outlets and also things that Mossad directors have openly said in interviews, is that for the past 20 years, Mossad has had almost unlimited funding and energy directed towards Iran regime change policy. And that a key component of that, according to former Mossad director Meir Dagan, among others, is getting the U.S. to strike Iran first. And there's been a push for a long time from, the neocon sectors within the United States to have the U.S. preemptively strike Iran, among other things. And you had pushes coming from some of the biggest donors to the GOP. For example, Sheldon Adelson, when he was still alive, the biggest donor to the Republican Party and also to Trump, was also pushing for preemptive military action against Iran. He isn't necessarily around anymore, but that type of policy idea has been floated for a very long time. And after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the IRGC general, who was very famous, there was rhetoric coming from Mike Pompeo when he was CIA director, and also Trump, that if Iran launched any sort of retaliation, including a cyber attack, they would respond with military action to Iran. So there has been a lot of fear-mongering about exactly this. And of course, it's important to keep in mind that next year, the exact year when the WEF managing director has predicted this attack is going to take place, is an election year in the United States.
Right.
And a lot of the same rhetoric about some imminent cyber attack, whether from Iran, Russia, and or China, was being utilized to a significant degree in the 2020 election as well. And you actually had what I've argued is an Israeli intelligence front company, a cybersecurity company called Cyber was gaming out and conducting simulations with DHS and some of our top law enforcement and intelligence agencies, how hackers could disrupt the 2020 election, have the election canceled and martial law declared, exactly what hackers would need to do for those conditions to be met. So there is a lot of stuff going on in the cyber realm that not enough people are paying attention to. And the most concerning thing about this, I would argue, besides the WEF warnings, is that you have a series of entities, many of which are tied to foreign intelligence, sitting on the most critical infrastructure systems in the United States, have access to those systems, and other groups have given access to those systems to people that haven't even been vetted by our own government. It's madness.
And is that tied to the...
So, yeah, shout out to Whitney Webb, man. She is a genius. And so she goes on to discuss a little bit more about why this would take place. And, you know, for the people who are sort of like these hyper rationalists, there's a reason for everything and they wouldn't do this. And why would the government, blah, 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 whatever. You got to look at big picture stuff, right? I mean, like she says, as far as like getting us into conflict with Iran, furthering this, furthering the issues that are going on in the Middle East. But they, you know, she also gets into talking about the control mechanisms, you know, the top down controls that would be able to be justified under a situation like this. So now we already have, you know, presidential candidate like Nikki Haley saying that, you know, everybody online there should be no anonymity, that everyone should be required to have their, you know, full government name attached to their social media accounts and all of this different stuff. But essentially destroying the idea of online anonymity. And so this kind of gets into the ties between tech and banking. If they are able to pull off a scenario like this and reboot the internet, you know, 6 months out, however long out, you know, have people really down bad, because this, I mean, make no mistake, this would be a catastrophic event for, you know, the U.S. economy. And, you know, just like we said, with the amount of people that could potentially die from this. But it puts people in this state of desperation. And so when you relaunch the internet or you relaunch these networks, being able to sort of funnel everyone into accepting a digital ID or a CBDC, which is a central bank digital currency. And this is a topic that both Whitney Webb and a woman named Catherine Austin Fitts, who is another super genius, one of the greatest like truthers, if you want to call it that, one of the greatest truthers out here. And she's been warning against the CBDC systems for a long time, that this is the final mechanism of control. Once CBDCs are implemented, you essentially have a slave class. You will not be able to speak out against anything that the government is doing or anything that you don't like going on in the system. And so this is sort of the thesis behind, you know, why something like this might take place. So this, you know, if you're familiar with my background and, you know, my music career, again, you might have seen the short film that we did for my last album, Merry Prankster. We did a short film called Never Trust a Prankster that sort of showcased some of the outdoorsmen and prepping and survivalist skills that I've learned over the years. And, you know, just that sort of mentality, something that hadn't really, in my opinion, been covered or shown in hip hop. But just to bring that awareness to a new audience, I thought it was important to do that for my video. And it sort of fits into a lot of the topics that are discussed on the records on that album, Merry Prankster. So just as far as like, you know, if something like this were to take place, I think it's first of all important to consider all of this stuff, because again, a lot of people just, it's a blind spot for them. They feel like this is America and nothing bad will ever happen. And I'm gonna tell you, you know, when you read history, right before any catastrophic event happens, there's always this idea from the masses, from the general public, that nothing is going to happen, that, you know, there's not going to be a war, this can never happen, there won't be famine, whatever it is. There's this really deep-seated sense of denial in people, and I think it's important to override that. You know, always consider the options, always consider what could go wrong. And people like to think that that's negativity. I think it's realistic and it's practical. You know, I'll say up front, if this is something you haven't really been considering, you're probably not going to make it, man. Because I think the mental preparedness in this situation is going to be even more important than material preparedness. You know, the just being able to, again, game out the scenarios and figure out, you know, what's going on and not be waiting for people to save you. You know, something I think was going on during COVID was this sort of divide between the people who were willing to do anything for safety and the people who sort of valued these, you know, valued their convictions and their morals over things like freedom and, you know, civil rights and things like this. And, you know, I'm not even 100% sure that a massive like grid or power outage or internet outage would be like the worst thing in the world, right? Besides, you know, the loss of life would be terrible, but it would be another one of these lines that sort of divides people into even smaller groups, because you got to think about, you know, the amount of people who are willing to lose their jobs or, you know, whatever opportunities to lose their scholarships, to get kicked out of college, to refuse the COVID vaccines. You're going to shrink that demographic by way more with a situation like this. And that's always been something that I've been talking about since like 2020, 2021, is this idea of, you know, dissidence and rebellion that's sort of, you know, taking hold and taking root, people getting a little bit more outspoken about the fact that they think something's going on. But all they need is a scenario like this where they don't necessarily need to go to you. They don't need to force you to take a vaccine to keep your job. They'll create a scenario where they can get you to come to them. Right. And so like the South Park episode we talked about, where the internet goes down and they have these sort of military outposts and camps, right? You know, what happens to people who have a family, who have kids, and the electricity is out for, you know, has been out for a week and a half now, and you have no hot water, you can't cook because all your appliances are electrical. The crime is getting out of control because at night it's pitch black and you can't see anything, and people are robbing and stealing and all types of different things. You're gonna probably pick up and go to one of these. You would be likely to pick up and go to a military outpost or camp and seek shelter and refuge. And a lot of times those places are not, those shelters are not really where you want to be. I know a lot of people could speak to things that happened in the Superdome after Hurricane Katrina and what a horrific environment it was in there. You know, just having people basically, you know, sheltering like animals just stacked on top of each other in this massive place and using these public facilities and stuff like this. You know, I would say that, you know, and then not to mention, they'll probably force you to take vaccines on the spot if you're trying to, you know, do you have proof of vaccination? If not, we're going to inject you with as many things as we want before we let you in here, because it's a public safety thing. And, you know, there's so many people here that we have to protect and keep safe. So I could totally see a scenario like that happening in the event that something like this does happen, which is why I say that it's important to think about all these things. As far as material stuff, you know, it's been talked about ad nauseum at this point, but, you know, practicing your Second Amendment is always should be the top priority for a lot of people. You should have firearms. You should be able to defend yourself and your family. Water is going to be, obviously, again, one of the top things, food and water, but water specifically just because of the nature of, how necessary it is and how difficult it is to find clean water sources if your taps aren't working. But skills, I think, are something that is underrated. A lot of people don't have practical primitive skills that they can rely on, and these are the types of things that will benefit you when trying to form alliances and meet people who are like-minded, because I think that a catastrophic event like this would definitely be again a huge sort of benefit to finding like-minded individuals who are focused on self-empowerment and figuring out how we can build community to sort of ignore these technological control systems that are going to be rolled out. If you don't want to end up in the digital gulag, this would be a good opportunity to find other people who are not going to take the digital ID and accept the central bank digital currency. So know how to make fire. That's something that you can do. Again, if you saw my short film, Never Trust a Prankster, you'll have seen me working the bow drill and stuff like that. And these are skills that I've learned just in the event of anything happening. I've always been called crazy for bringing this stuff up. But I always said, like, who does it hurt to have these skills? Like, who does it hurt to, buy extra outdoor supplies or emergency supplies like, flashlights and camping materials and stuff like this. And if nothing happens, you just have emergency supplies. There's no harm in being prepared. But I think, again, part of the issue that people have with getting themselves prepared, or at least somewhat prepared for these things, is that they would then have to accept that as a reality, that this event or any sort of catastrophic event could actually happen, that they could be left in a situation where they really are on their own and got to fend for themselves. I think that mental block really just stops a lot of people. And what I will say is, the prepper community is it gets a little bit too far out for my liking. A lot of people, there's a lot of ego with it. People think that, like, no, I have all these guns and I got blah, blah, blah. And I got, I'm solar powered and I'm off grid. Listen, nobody is prepared for this. Nobody, I'm telling you, and like I said, I think the mental toughness is going to be more important than material preparedness, just because you could have all of the stuff in the world. But if you cracking under the pressure, if you can't think straight and you can't make the right decisions at the right times, you're just as vulnerable as anybody else. So I think it's important to just be level-headed and not think that, like, man, like I'm that guy, I'm gonna just be out here Ramboing it. And, it's like, nah, it's not gonna go down like that. So, making yourself useful, like I said, fire making, if you have hunting skills, fishing, butchering, technical skills in engineering, and medical knowledge, those things are things that will be super useful and make you benefit you when trying to form alliances and get in with groups, because you're not gonna be able to do this on your own. But we'll get off of the prepping topic, and but I do hope that people take things like this seriously, that people are willing to consider the idea that something like this can happen, because they're putting it out there for you, kind of showing you what the possibility is. And I think it's stupid to dismiss it. Netflix put out that film a couple years ago with the train crash and spilling the toxic chemicals, and then it happened in East Palestine, Ohio, a couple months after that, I believe. So it's definitely interesting, and I think a lot of things are being put in our face just to sort of, prepare people. And if you don't heed the warning, it's kind of on you at that point. So moving on, the report from the federal government came out about the homeless statistics, and the homelessness has risen 12% to reach a record level in the U.S. And there's been a lot of reasons for this. They cite the high cost of rental and housing in this country, drug abuse, the influx of illegal migrants. So we have an article here on NPR. It's something like up a whopping 12%. And there's a story in here about a family living in their car out of a Walmart parking lot. Just a lot of crazy stuff going on. That's unfortunate. And I think that this stuff will get worse. Later in the article, it calls for, apparently advocates are calling for more federally subsidized housing. And when you get into talking about that stuff, we're sort of in the realm of this, I hesitate to say like this communist sort of takeover, but it does seem as though these all of these events are destabilizing factors. This was one of my big things during COVID, is that it was a destabilization operation. And the more that you can sort of make people hopeless and lower their quality of life, the more that they will again beg for control systems and more federal and government overreach to be able to sort of make up for these for this downturn. And so once you have a large, an even larger federal housing system, that's just another mechanism of control where you can't afford to speak out against anything going on, because they can kick you out of your home. They can deny your federal benefits. So yeah, I think that this is another thing to sort of keep an eye on. And in conjunction with this, we could talk about the FBI crime report that was released. A lot of the sources are saying that crime is down. Violent crime levels have decreased, but property crime on the rise, as you see in this headline. So they're basically saying that the violent crime is down 1.7%, but the property crimes, including carjackings and robberies, are up by 7%. And in a lot of these instances, a lot of the carjackings and things like this, there are weapons used in the robbery. And in this article, it says that someone was injured in more than a quarter of all carjackings. So over 25% of the carjackings, somebody is being hurt. And so I personally wonder about the accuracy of the statistics when it comes to stuff like this. I think that, there's got to be an impact on possibly the police staffing shortages across the country. The defund the police initiatives that popped off after the George Floyd situation and the BLM protests. I wonder how much that is skewing these stats, not having enough, cops on the street and enough people to handle all of this reporting. I wonder how much violent crimes are being recategorized, which is something that has been used by, cities and states to juke the stats on a lot of this stuff. They'll reframe a violent crime as a misdemeanor in order to keep those numbers down and to make it look like they are doing a good job at keeping things in check. But I'm not sure that that's the case. Just because, it's one of those don't believe your lying eyes situations where I think a lot of stuff is going on that people are seeing, and the system is sort of trying to tell you, no, everything's okay. Like, go back to sleep. Nothing to see here. So that was just something that I thought was interesting, and I think ties into the homelessness crisis that's going on right now, because, again, you have a lot of people who are mentally unwell, who are on drugs, just out on the street, and who knows what those people are up to. And, once they become desperate or, are looking to to either get some food or a room for a night or just get, drugs, what they might be willing to do. Alex Jones was reinstated on Twitter this past week, I believe. This is coming off of his appearance on Tucker Carlson's show. So I kind of saw that one coming when, because you got the guy, he's banned from the platform, but arguably the platform's biggest star in Tucker Carlson was allowed to have Alex Jones on his show. So I kind of smelled something in the air like that, Elon or, whatever, the Twitter was going to unban him. And of course, a lot of people know that there was a big, Elon did like a big Twitter poll asking people if he should unban Alex Jones. And myself and a lot of other people were critical of this because it's like you're taking a vote on, you claim you're this free speech absolutist and all this stuff, but you're taking a poll on whether or not this person who, didn't threaten anybody with violence or anything should be quote unquote allowed back on the platform, which is kind of weird. Also, Alex Jones recently agreed to pay a $55 million settlement in the Sandy Hook trial or, civil case that was, he had a judgment against him for, I think it was like $1.5 billion. So he's now offering to pay $55 million to settle that with the families. And I think this is a weird time. Like, I'm questioning the rehabilitation of Alex Jones' brand and his public image recently with him being allowed back on Twitter and this big story about him agreeing to pay this $55 million. And if you're not super familiar with Alex Jones, he's one of the OGs of the internet sort of conspiracy sphere or circle. And has been super influential to a lot of people in their research of, deep state and intelligence operations. It's been questioned whether Alex is an operative himself, if he's controlled opposition. One of his biggest videos was back in the day, he allegedly snuck into this event called the Bohemian Grove, which is a party or I guess you'd say a networking event for extremely wealthy people out in California. They get together and apparently burn an effigy called the Cremation of Care, where they basically burn their any sort of convictions or how would you say fears and issues that they would have with subjugating the lower classes. And it's sort of this indulgent and extravagant affair, but he snuck in there and filmed this ceremony and put it online, and that was where he sort of made his name. That video has gone viral and has been circulating for years. I don't really know what I've known of Alex for a long time. He was in a film called Waking Life by Richard Linklater, which is an incredible film, highly recommended, one of my favorites. And I sort of got familiar with Alex around that time. But, he's definitely had his ups and downs in the media over the years with his platform InfoWars. He's been banned from a lot of stuff. I think it's beneficial to have his voice out here. I don't really necessarily have a problem with Alex, but I do think that I do sort of buy the controlled opposition stuff. He's a very outspoken guy against the technological prison that's being built, the implanting brain chips, and the idea that we are moving towards a digital technocracy, if you will. But then, he gets on a Twitter space with Elon the other night, and I think it was Elon, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Andrew Tate and Alex Jones they're all in there, sort of just rehashing their greatest hits, like all of the things that they're known for saying, like Elon, like, oh yeah, free speech and we need to colonize Mars, and Alex with the whole, the deep state and this, that, and the third, and Andrew Tate now the Muslim with all of his nonsense. It's just, it's a war on masculinity. And I hesitate to take any of these guys seriously at this point, because it's just, it's just a lot of talking. And like I said, with Alex, he got in the space and was suddenly all of a sudden like, brain chips are great. I have a cousin or somebody who's paralyzed who has a brain chip, and so it's sort of like, what side are you on, man? Are you against the transhumanists? Are you against the technocracy? Or is this just like, are you just like getting people riled up? And are you just like out here saying the most outlandish thing to get people to dismiss the idea of a lot of the, situations we're talking about? Because, that's sort of the accusation that's levied at controlled opposition, is that it's this way to make all conspiracy theorists or people with dissenting views from the mainstream narrative, to make all of those people look crazy and, like they don't know what they're talking about. So, I don't know what the deal is with Alex. The jury is out. And I sort of just, again, I think it's important to have his voice out there, just because he does make good points sometimes, and he does bring new people into the fold and sort of get people thinking about different certain situations and different approaches to how we can make change. But I question whether, how much of it is genuine. So that's about all I got for this week. Again, holla at me, leave me comments. I'm always willing to have a conversation. But yeah, think about all of this stuff and be as prepared as you can for any sort of emergency situations that may take place. Y'all might already know this, but if any of this stuff happens, if the internet goes down and the digital ID is implemented, all this stuff, y'all not going to see me again. That's a hard line for me. I rejected the vax at great personal risk and sacrifice to myself. I lost a lot. I lost a lot of friends. I lost employment. But yeah, there are just hard lines for me of things that I'm not willing to do, things I'm not willing to comply with. So if anything like that happens, y'all won't see me. I know I'm already shadow banned on a lot of these platforms anyway. I had an issue. I posted my last episode to X or Twitter, and a bunch of people couldn't even see it. It was essentially, I believe, shadow banned. So I ended up having to repost that. We are up on Rumble, so you can follow us there at Foster the Podcast. But who knows how long I'm going to be on these platforms for, because it does seem like the tech censorship is ramping up. They really don't want us out here talking to each other. But I'm just, again, I'm doing this for fun, man. I'm doing this to connect with y'all. I'm not trying to get a MeUndies deal. I'm not selling athletic greens. This is just me, spitting my darts and getting my bars off. So, yeah, man, leave a comment. Get at me. Hit me up. This is Foster the Podcast, episode 3. I am Foster the Prankster, signing off. Peace.